This is Marcel Vogel speaking. I'm going to talk to you now on how to tune the crystal, charge it, clear it, and prepare oneself for the basic operations that are used in the therapeutic practices that we use with these crystals. The crystal I have in my hand now is a four-sided, double-terminated crystal designed for healing purposes. This is the first crystal I designed, and we've gone on now to the 6, the 7, and the 8-sided crystal. The increase in number of sides here increase the volume of energy that a crystal will hold. It is like having a 4-volt, 6-volt, and 8-volt battery. The same function takes place in the crystal, except that there is an increase in charge and power. There are two ends to the crystal. One end, the lower end here, has a pyramid type angle. This other end is designed to release the charge that is coming from the tip of the crystal. Input here and output or release here. It is truly diode in nature, in the sense that this then would be looked on as positive, this side as negative. If one focuses with the crystal in this way onto diamagnetic material like graphite, this will repel, this other side will attract. Now the first step that one goes through is to clear the crystal from previous vibrations, or just in storage the vibrations are accreted onto the crystal. That is done by holding in one's hand this way between the thumb and the index finger. Between each two tips, one takes then the other two fingers, places them on two of the faces, draw one's breath in, and let the breath out through the nostrils, and goes on to the other pair of faces and releases. This is true now for the four-sided crystal. If one has then a higher number of faces, as we have here on the 6-sided crystal, one does it for all three pairs. The crystal is clear. One can measure this clarity with instrumentation that we have here in the laboratory, and we get now only the fundamental vibration of the crystal, which is 454. The next phase is to take the crystal in one's hand and roll it. It's like a stator in a magnet motor, and when one rotates the stator, one induces a charge in the crystal. One should rotate the crystal with the operating tip facing up and the smaller angle facing downward, and one just rotates. And the rotation is clockwise to the right. How many turns? Until you feel the crystal becoming sticky in your hand, meaning that as you rub it with your fingers, it takes on an increase in friction or stickiness. One then stops when one feels that. Draw one's breath in with the crystal held in this position releases the breath through the nostrils. When that is done, to those who are sensitive, one will feel a pulsation between this finger and this finger. It feels like the beat of a heart. This does not happen to everyone, but all of you can feel the following. Is after you have charged the crystal, you take your index finger, you place it on the crystal, draw your breath in and release your breath, and you find that you've stuck your finger to the crystal. Draw your breath in as you look at it, and the finger becomes free and starts to move freely. Let your breath out as you look at the crystal, and it sticks. Draw the breath in, because here now, with focusing one's mind, one draws the charge out with breath and releases the charge with the outgoing breath. When one detaches from one's intention and focus, that does not happen. The crystal operates of its own, oscillates, and one then can work with the charge through one's finger. I repeat this carefully. When one focuses one's attention onto the crystal, one can draw then with intention, with the indwelling breath, the charge out from the crystal, and the outgoing breath, you apply the charge. We will come to this again and again throughout the healing procedure. It is in breathing with intention that you build the charge and create the patterns that are necessary to release, balance, and heal the body of an individual. This finger here can be looked on now as a shutter control. Movement of this finger back and forth will cause this field to broaden or narrow. As one moves the finger down, the field gets lower, bring it back, it becomes broader. One can use the finger, this one also, as a sensor. We will come to this as one locks into the body of a person, and one waits then in holding. One will feel a vibration here and move the finger. When it locks, one knows that a charge is flowing freely through the body into the hand and closing a circuit again. So it has a dual function. One, controlling the volume of charge. Second, a sensor for the charge that is flowing or not flowing. These two fingers act as governors of the energy that one wishes to release or draw from the person. As one draws one breath in, one squeezes onto the crystal, one feels one's body perspire, and when one releases the outgoing breath, there's a jerking action. These fingers convulse and create then in the crystal an additional charge. This crystal, quartz, silicon dioxide, has a quality of piezoelectricity. This means that when you squeeze the crystal, the pressure is converted into an EMF or electrical charge. If you apply an electrical charge between these two plates like this, these two parallel surfaces, a vibration or sound is produced. So it converts pressure into electricity or EMF, or you can apply an EMF and it is converted into a vibration or sound. We're dealing with both of these modalities when one works with the crystal. This covers now the clearing and charging phase of the crystal, and I will repeat this now before closing the first part. To clear a crystal, one holds it in one's hand this way, and here breathes through the nostril second time. What is going on in one's mind is the thought or intention of clearing. It is your intention that produces the result. Phase 2, you charge the crystal by first rolling until you feel a slight stickiness. Then you draw your breath in, create an image of the crystal in one's mind, and release the breath with the eyes closed. That completes phase 1.
Is there a scientific basis to healing with prayer and crystals? Our final guest tonight believes he can prove it. Dr. Marcel Vogel is recognized as one of the most authoritative researchers into the therapeutic use of quartz crystals. For 27 years, he was a senior research scientist and one of the most prolific inventors at IBM, scientist Dr. Marcel Vogel. Good evening, Marcel.
Good evening to you, and hi.
Hello.
How are you?
How did you get involved in research with crystals?
It's a rather I've been into crystals all of my life, first of all. I've grown crystals in the furnace, in the laboratory, but the handling of quartz for their therapy and the unusual properties which we're going to be talking on now started in 1973. I gave a talk at the Church of Religious Science, and a minister there heard me talk, and she called me the next day and she said, I feel impelled. I want to send you a crystal, a quartz crystal. I am a stockholder in this quartz crystal mine in Ontario, Canada, and this crystal is unusual because when you hold it in your hand, I find that it will vibrate or oscillate in your hand. And I had about a zero interest in doing anything along this line. And she was very insistent that she send it to me, and I said, if you want, send it to me. So in the mail came the crystal, and next to me the time I received it was a young man by the name of Chuck McNosa, who I had hired as my assistant, a very sensitive young man. And I took the crystal in my hands and I drew my breath in. And as I released my breath, sure enough, I felt this vibration or pulsation in the crystal. I said, that's interesting. Now, what is this vibration? And I took then the crystal and pointed it at the face of Chuck McNosa and just pulsed my breath. When I did that, his head went back, and he went into an altered state of consciousness. In fact, we went to the Pyramid of Cheops. We went to different parts of the country. We did traveling together. And this was done. I put the crystal aside and forgot about it. I had so many other things going in the laboratory at the time. I just developed the new types of phosphors, your rare earth phosphors, yttrium vanadate europium and europium tungstate. And so my mind was occupied with a million other things.
And this is back, you said, in 1970 what?
1974.
1974.
73 and 74.
Okay.
So it's not too many years ago.
Dr. Vogel,
What?
I was going to ask you, what are crystals?
Pardon me?
What are crystals, Dr. Vogel?
Crystals are multiple unit cells of a particular species. Like, for example, quartz now is silicon dioxide, SiO2. It assembles in space as what we call a unit cell. Then this unit cell accretes together to form a single crystal. So each one of these unit cells orderly and regularly associate together and form then a single crystal. That is called then a single crystal. You will have polycrystals, which there will be jumbled masses of little tiny dendritic forms of crystals. These are called polycrystals.
In your psychic research newsletter, you talk about the fact that we actually have crystals in our body. Will you explain
Yes.
this?
Now, when I speak of that, I'm speaking of the structures that are in the cellular membranes, are lyotropic mesophases. These are liquid crystal membranes. And these membranes are controlled by the very weak electrical fields and also very sensitive to patterns of thought. And they will change in electrical conductivity, they will change in surface resistivity. And this is the outer membrane of each individual cell in our body. I have studied this extensively in my own laboratory. I have a rather large microscope, about $250,000 optical microscope.
Is this liquid crystal membrane something that's acknowledged by current scientific
Oh,
community?
yes, it's published. I've got hundreds of papers on this.
Well, that's good. Then what do you mean when you say that the Earth is a crystal?
Well, the Earth also acts as a single membrane in the sense that it is vibrating, creating a field in space. And that field coheres in space, and that coherent field takes on the characteristics of a crystallographic formation. See, once energy starts to cohere together, it takes on the property of matter. It is transition from energy into matter. What I have ended up in the intensive studies that I have done now, is I feel that we are making quantum transducers for the mind. I'm making... Hello? And what I mean by that is that when you hold a crystal in your hand, you're storing information, not electrical or magnetic fields, but information. And that information then can be locked into a crystal, and it can be then processed by another person, or it can be processed by spinning that crystal, water around the crystal, or wine. Now, I've proven this point many thousands of times by putting a program in with my mind of finishing a wine, or a young wine. I do that, and then we take the wine and pass it once around the crystal, and the wine comes out a finished wine, as if it had been cellared for many, many years. And we've done about 100,000 gallons of that now. About 9, 10 different categories of wine. And once I take the program out with my mind, nothing happens to the wine. It just becomes the same wine as you put in. So the primary controller is the mentation, the program that you imprint with your mind. So this is the first step to building mind computers. So you see how big this is.
Yes.
Well, what can we use crystals for, Dr. Vogel?
Well, I'm giving you one for opening up whole new areas and fields of chemistry, And in the purification of water, what I have done now in therapeutics is to relieve blockages in the human body, imprinting of patterns where people have suffered stress, shock. If you'd had a copy of the last issue from the experiences in Australia, I'll give you an example. A man came to me who had been bitten by a poisonous insect. He was still in shock. The doctors wanted to amputate his leg. He was that toxic. He refused to have his leg amputated. He came to me, and I treated him once with the crystal to release the toxin from his body, from the insect bite. The whole auditorium, there was about 300 people in the auditorium, filled with the odor of formic acid. His body shook, and suddenly his whole skin, texture, everything cleared up. The doctors took his blood pressure before and after. The blood pressure dropped radically. Next morning, the doctors took his blood pressure. The following day, it had dropped even further. His total body stabilized. All pain left his limbs, and he was perfectly normal.
All from the use of a crystal.
One treatment with the crystal.
Unbelievable.
That was witnessed by over 200 people.
Well, a lot of people, as you know, currently are infatuated, might be a good word, with quartz crystals. How do you charge a crystal? There's so much misinformation out there.
I'm sorry about that, and it's very, very simple. It's the intention of the operator. It's the intention of the operator. I've demonstrated this again and again. To charge a crystal, you hold it in your hand, you take a deep breath, put your thoughts in, and release your breath, and it's charged.
A crystal.
Cleaning the crystal, you hold it in your hand, and you visualize emptying the charge and releasing all of the unwanted programs, pulsing your breath, and it's clean. And I have scientific equipment that I measure these things, omega-5 and spectrophotometers, and I can verify all of these operations by secondary backup work that I've done in pH, spectrophotometry, and all of the secondary scientific measurement.
Well, I think that the information you've just given us is so important because there's so many books out there that tell you use salt water and put it in the sun and
heat it up and cool it down.
Can we move on to the Bavarian experiment with prayer? It is
Yes,
so significant.
That is so wonderful because what we had there were 34 people up in the Alps, Bavarian Alps, and the majority of them had their own crystal. And they had a Roman Catholic priest with us, and he was just a delightful person. He had a guitar, and we sat at nighttime, and we played the guitar together. And with us was a physicist, a medical doctor, and I had my omega-5 to measure the forces that were in the crystal and in the water. So we put a jug of water on the altar, and we measured the field that was present in each person's crystal. Now, we had the crystals that were cut by us, and we had about a half a dozen crystals that were natural crystals that people got, like Herkimer diamonds and other naturally terminated crystals. Do you follow?
Yes.
So, we measured these, and we recorded these results on day 1, after the Mass, day 2, day 3, and day 4. We measured both the crystal and the water that was on the altar. On day 1, it was about 10 to the 3rd power. In other words, numbers with 3 digits. The same thing true with the water. The second day was about 10 to the 5th digits, 5 digits.
Dr. Vogel, I'll have to pause in just a few seconds. We'll be back after a 3. Dr. Marcel Vogel, would you please?
Are you ready?
Yes, we're ready now.
All righty. We did the measurements with 3 people, a physicist, a medical doctor, and myself, and we all got exactly the same readings. After the second day, we got no further readings from either the Herkimer diamonds or the natural crystals. They did not charge. The third and fourth day, they crept up, and finally when we got to the fourth day, it went up to 10 to the 34th power.
Oh, my.
4 times 10 to the 34th power, 5-4. I took a sample of that water with me home, and 1 year later, measured that water, and it was exactly the same reading that we had when we did it a year ago in Germany.
1 year later.
1 year later. Now, we did a spectrophotometric analysis of that in the ultraviolet. The curve went off of the graph. We had the highest response from any sample of water as far as the ultraviolet spectrophotometry. The energy in that region was the highest that we've recorded from any known source.
Can you explain that a little bit more for those?
Yes, I can now. We're really having to devote our life to this because this is absolutely virgin areas of research. We are dealing with storage phenomena of forces which are not in the electromagnetic area of the spectrum. Call it whatever you want, tachyons or whatever you want to give them a name. But when these forces come to a certain level, they become critical, and they start to jump to a very, very high level. Between the third and the fourth day, went from 10 to the 5th to 10 to the 34th. I encounter exactly the same thing in my studies on wine. I take wine and I pass the new wine that I'm studying 1 time around, 2 times around the coil, around the crystal, testing 3, 4. When I get to the 4th pass, I come to a peak. The next time around, the wine is degenerated, it's gone. So I take that reading, that value, put that information into the crystal, and now that information will structure that wine again and again on infinitum.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I took drops of this water, put it in triple distilled water, and I got a reduced reading, but I still got a tremendously amplified reading by just 1 drop in 100 cc's.
Dr. Vogel, I'm sorry to break in one more time.
I was wondering, do you think that rocks really have the power to heal?
Hello?
Hello?
Go ahead. A little bit louder. Your voice is very faint.
Do you actually think that rocks have the power to heal?
Could what?
To heal?
She wants to know if rocks have the power to heal, Dr. Vogel.
No, they do not. No rock has the power to heal. You heal with your mind and your love. What really heals is the love that's in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
See, what I do, when I charge a crystal, I put the thought of love and well-being. I say a prayer. Dear Lord, let me be of service to this person. Not my will, but thine. And when I do that, I separate my own will, so the crystal itself is only an instrument. It has no power of itself to heal. And that's where so many people get a misnomer and build a lot of unusual fears about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I agree with you.
Okay.
I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and you have won a copy of Psychic Research Newsletter and a crystal. And friends, in the future, we are going to give out more crystals and Psychic Research Newsletters over the next couple of months on the Dr. Bob Show.
Good.
Okay, Dr. Vogel, we have a break that's coming up in about a minute and a half, after which we will have 11 whole minutes for us to talk uninterruptedly, and that's a great boon here.
Oh, that's going to be perfect.
Yeah, so why don't we spend a little bit of this last minute then talking a little bit more about the power of love and what you started to tell our caller, Kathy.
It's really fulfilling what Christ gave us 2,000 years ago. He said, if you wish to love me, love your fellow man. And the whole principle of healing that Christ did was loving. And unfortunately, we've called them miracles, but he said, all of these things I have done, you can do in like manner.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried them out, and I find, yes, I can help people who are deaf to hear and blind to see. I've got video records of all of these things accomplished. I've got about 300 videotapes that I've made.
And we have about 5 seconds for us to announce this is the Dr. Bob Show on the American Radio Network's back in just a minute.
Marcel Vogel. Dr. Vogel is combining his lifetime study of energy conversion in crystalline coating systems, magnetism, phosphor technology, and optical microscopy with a study of the energies of mind and spirit. It is his intent to quantify and identify these energies and to apply them to Psychic Research Incorporated's current projects of purifying water, aging wine, for which Dr. Vogel has a patent and what we've talked about this evening, and the therapeutic application of crystals and crystal devices. Along those lines, Dr. Vogel,
Yes.
you mentioned in your recent newsletter, Psychic Research newsletter, some work with the smoky quartz crystals and getting rid of residual radiation.
Yes.
Would you talk about this?
Yes, I'd like to. We did the following. We took the smoky quartz and exposed it to X-ray. And we then took and spun the water around the crystal that we had exposed to X-ray and put the water onto photographic Polaroid film against a control. Now, the Polaroid film developed and formed a perfect imprint or image of the base of the water from the radiation that came from the crystal. Now, we found a means of stripping this radiation by exposing it then to red light. And when we did that, there was no radiation left in the crystal, and it was gone. So, what this gave me as an indicator that a person who had been exposed to radiation, such as X-rays, who have been, having X-rays of the teeth or chest X-rays, they could wear a smoky quartz and then take the smoky quartz and give it exposure to red light. It would clear it and then put it back on their body and wear it again. Now, this is preliminary, and I have the validation from the photographic evidence that there was radiation transferred to the water.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we got a sensitive Geiger counter, and I was able to measure the a radiation charge with the Geiger counter on the smoky quartz. And when I cleared it, it was gone. Now, this is an active research yet, but it does store. And the principle is the following. Smoky quartz is a product of radiation. In other words, nature creates a defect in the lattice spacing of the silica and the silicon dioxide. It is thrown out of kilter, forming a F center or Farben center. That gives you the color of the smoky quartz. So it is produced by radiation, so it is logical that radiation will absorb in that region as well, and it does, and I find that to be true.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more work yet to be done, but it's the first step towards a real practical dosimeter for a person to wear and take the radiation out of the body.
Particularly for people undergoing chemotherapy and radiation treatment.
So all of this type of thing, yes.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
And
Wow.
I'm publicly sharing it like I am with you because I don't want to patent it. I want to make it public knowledge and have it available for everyone to use.
Mm-hmm.
That is my intention.
Well, while we're on the subject of radiation, what does underground nuclear testing do to the Earth?
Makes a mess of it.
Can you talk about that? Because you did talk about the Earth being a crystal, and now we know that crystals hold things. And
Well, we're throwing everything out of kilter. I feel very unhappy over it. I wish there are much better ways of creating energy, and we should take time to look on alternate forms of creating energy instead of nuclear power.
do you think that the nuclear testing has a lot to do with recent earthquakes around the planet?
I can't answer that, dear. I'm not qualified from a scientific standpoint to give this type of opinion. I'd be remiss to do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak within my own scientific expertise. When I go beyond that, I'd be foolhardy.
Well, you know what's nice, Marcel?
What?
We can always count on you for professional judgment.
By the way, I have finished the book now. It's taken me 14 years. And it'll be myself on crystals. It will be out this year by Valentine.
Oh, great.
It'll be about 1,000 pages. But it'll be about 150 case histories. So that would be the first book with actual case histories with all different professionals detailing how they've used the crystal, what they have found, and what they have not found.
Mm-hmm.
And above all, the follow-up, what has worked and what I've gone into carefully, what areas it has not worked in.
Just as important, obviously.
Oh, yeah. See, one of the key things I've found is when you treat with a crystal, you're removing a block. It's like pulling a plug on a dam.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after you do that, then the body's got to rebuild itself, and you've got to go into regular therapy to help a person to rebuild.
Right.
And you just don't expect, you're not performing miracles in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. And I think the point you made earlier is so important for people who work with crystals or who work in the healing profession to realize that they're not doing it, and that they're instruments for this divine cosmic energy called love. At least that's how we experience it.
That's what I call.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, let me ask you a question along these lines. I have an interest in 21st century medicine along naturopathic lines and direct to center. What do you see as the medicine of 21st century?
A complete new set of flower essences.
What do you mean by that?
I'm going to be making them in a cup in another this month. I'm going to start in from Australia.
Can you explain this a little bit more?
Oh, yes. We'll be making them with structured water. You'll be having brand new forms of flowered essences with structured water, and then we're going to go right into homeopathic materials.
That was something I was going to ask you, because in your work, the circulation of water, the movement of the water, seems to be the key to holding the template of information.
That is correct.
Uh-huh.
When you spin, you create a vortex.
Mm-hmm.
And that vortex, vortexing the fluid, is informational transfer.
Mm-hmm. Well,
We're not talking electromagnetic. We're talking informational transferring. Now, that spinning of a fluid, even if it's in a stainless steel coil, if you take a magnetometer, a very sensitive magnetometer like I've had, I can measure a magnetic moment in the coil up to by 0.07 Gauss.
Mm-hmm.
So the net from that spinning fluid is a magnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
But the initial vortex is not in the electromagnetic field. It's information. See, it's informational transfer.
Well, one of the questions I had, and we've asked this before, most people think, well, you can just pick up a crystal that comes from some mine somewhere, Brazil or whatever, and it starts to work kind of like automatically. Tell us what you do with crystals to make them work efficiently.
I get a raw crystal, and I've got about $100,000 worth of equipment bought, and a man that's taken 5 years of training to cut this crystal and finish it to the point where it is tuned like a laser. It is really a mind laser. So you cut away all of the dross until you have that thing down to the point where it becomes sensitive to your patterns of thought. Now, the discovery we made is the following. When I achieve this end, to my great joy and surprise, I get a number, 454, on the major reading I get on the crystal. When I measure water, I get exactly the same value for pure water, which is not contaminated. So the crystal and the water are tuned exactly to each other. Now, when I take a raw crystal, put it in the same equipment I have and measure it, it gets down to a number like 75, 100, 125. It's nothing compared to the 454.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting that precise numerical value repeatable. Every crystal we make has the same number and performs exactly the same way.
Well, I've seen your crystals, and they're exquisite.
Yes.
I've never seen anything else like them.
You got to see the 14 sides now, the 13 side ones that we're making.
I'd like to. I've seen the 8, I believe it is.
The 8 now, then we went up to 13 and 14.
Well, we're coming.
I'd like to say to all of you who are listening at this time, go to a rock shop and pick up a handful of small, inexpensive crystals of all different varieties, shape, and form. Purchase them and get a book on geology, and it will fascinate you from beginning to end to realize a wonderful course of nature as she grows these crystals down through the ages. Gemstones have been grown by nature, but we have this wonderful world of crystals, the amethyst, the jade, the quartz, and each of them have their own unique properties. And as you learn to study them and test them, you'll be able to discover these properties and enjoy them. It costs you only a few pennies to get these natural crystals, and they will teach you so much by just learning about them and feeling them and letting them teach you. I've done that with fluorescent minerals, the fluorescent rocks. I've done that with all the rocks I have here in and around me. The cutting I've made of crystals are for specific purposes, for scientific purposes. But I love a simple little crystal as much as a child. I've enjoyed being with all of you. I thank God for the gifts He has given me, and I've enjoyed the moments we have had together.
Well, thank you. You're very welcome, Dr. Vogel. And we're looking forward to your 1,000-page book by Ballantine Publishers. Is it this spring?
It's going to be later on. I'm not sure it's going to be 1,000 pages. I could probably cut it down, but
Oh, I guess so.
but it's going to be out this year. It was going to be out last year, but they put it ahead to this year now. But it's coming out this year now.
We look
Well-
forward to that.
It's going to be fun.
We look forward to having you again on our show, and thank you again for sending us all those crystals, which we will disseminate to the American audience over the next couple of weeks.
Tell them I enjoy them, and each of them has my love in it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vogel.
Goodbye now, and God bless you.
God bless you.
God
Bye-bye.